To this Whistler Biodiversity podcast. My name is Sky, and I've recently designed and implemented an eco-leadership project in 3 main phases. The first part of my project was organizing trash cleanups with the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup. The second phase are these podcasts, and the third phase is the construction and donation of bird and bee houses to various Whistler residents. So for this podcast series, it's going to be 5 parts. The first one today is going to be on plastic pollution. The next one will be on upcycling, one on bats, the birds and the bees, and the last one about how you can get more involved in various projects happening within your own community or here in Whistler. Each podcast will be 10 to 20 minutes long and will focus on various environmental aspects, hoping to really educate people and start us thinking about how we can change our own behaviors to better benefit the biodiversity that we share our urban areas with. So on that note, let's get talking about plastic pollution. Plastic. Is it really better than sliced bread? Maybe at one point it was considered to be a revolutionary step forward for mankind, similar to landing on the moon. But a couple decades later, we see this accumulation of plastic on Earth, and we know it is now becoming a real threat to biodiversity and even human health. Discarded and fragmented pieces of plastic and garbage line the shorelines of nations worldwide. Even more notable is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is twice the size of Texas. This patch, aka the Pacific Trash Vortex, is located in a gyre in the Pacific Ocean, just north of the islands of Hawaii. A gyre is a convergence zone for oceanic currents, and these currents work to entrap floating debris. Objects within the patch are a collection of garbage which originates from countries located around the Pacific Rim. Some of these countries include Japan, China, Russia, Canada, and the US. Although this patch is typically used to describe the accumulation of plastic debris, it should be noted that this is actually 2 patches. One patch in the east by California, and the other patch on the western side of the ocean by Japan. And these 2 patches work to encircle Hawaii, and it is predicted that these patches could merge in the coming decades. It's a huge hot topic in ocean conservation, and there are some organizations that work to educate people about plastic pollution as well as collect debris from the ocean, which is thought to have huge impacts on ocean wildlife and ocean health, and we'll get a little more into that. As plastic gets deposited into the environment, whether it be terrestrial or aquatic, it can persist for a very long time, as plastic is made of polymers which are highly resistant to decomposition. Some scientists think plastic can persist up to 1,000 years in the environment given certain conditions. Although it is hard to say because plastics have only been around since the early 1900s. So less than 100 years, maybe 100 years now. Instead of decomposing or biodegrading like other materials such as wood or even metal, plastic instead undergoes fragmentation. And this is the process where larger pieces of plastic are broken down into smaller pieces called microplastics or secondary plastics. This happens due to biological, chemical, or mechanical processes and is very similar to how you would imagine rocks weathering and breaking down within the rock cycle. Microplastics are visible to the human eye, and they are a huge concern for both human and animal health, as these smaller pieces of plastic are more easily consumed and can enter food chains more readily. Nanoplastics, that are plastic fragments which are less than 1 nanometer, are actually invisible to the human eye, and it makes this type of plastic pollution very hard to monitor. It is likely that this fragment size of microplastics could be occurring in very high concentrations within some environments, although it's hard to tell as much is still unknown. It is thought that nanoplastics are small enough to permeate through cellular membranes. So this has huge implications, especially in the ocean, where there are a lot of organisms who have a common life strategy of filter feeding. Filter feeders draw in water and strain out suspended particles from the water column. And this allows them to get the oxygen and gases they need, as well as particulate matter, such as food that they rely on. Common animals that do filter feed include sponges, krill, bivalves, such as clams or mussels and oysters, and even baleen whales like humpbacks, blue whales, and gray whales. So you can really see how you'll have plastic entering food webs, especially marine food webs, at various stages. So if krill are uptaking a lot of nanoplastics, then whatever eats the krill will eat the plastics that the krill has eaten and allow for concentration. Other than microplastics, we've also seen reports over the past couple of years of whales washing up dead, and when they do an investigation of the whale to figure out how it died, sometimes it is kilograms of plastic pollution which has become knotted up in the whale's stomach. It is unable to process this, and as it eats more and more plastic, it leaves less and less room for food, eventually starving the whale. And this is sad because in Canada, 90% of plastics will end up in landfills, incinerators, lakes, parks, or eventually the ocean. We can do better, and we must do better at reducing plastic consumption, in addition to improving recycling. As mentioned before, this autumn I started an eco-leadership project, which I dubbed the Whistler Trash Pandas, with the idea of helping reduce some of the plastic pollution within the green spaces of Whistler and along the Whistler Valley Trail. I've been recording my data on the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup, and I'll provide the link there. I think it's important to gather real numbers and real data, and in turn, hopefully these numbers can inspire accountability at both the personal and corporate levels. According to the 2019 metrics from the Great Canadian Shoreline, the top 12 pieces of garbage collected during cleanups were coffee cups, foam, packaging, straws, plastic bottles, beverage cans, plastic bags, paper materials, bottle caps, food wrappers, and microplastics. And the number one pollutant that they found in 2019 was cigarette butts. Over 500,000 cigarette butts were collected in 2019 alone. This leaves me thinking that we must do better to remember our 3 R's and the order which they are said: reduce, reuse, and recycle. When doing research, I found that the Suzuki Foundation has highlighted 10 basic actions which they hope can curb single-use plastics. Number 1, and this should be the first thing that we think to do when reducing plastics, is refusing the single-use plastic items. Whether that's bringing our own straws, bringing our own cutlery, bringing our own coffee cups. those allow us to then start refusing plastic, and we can stop the cycle right at the beginning. 2, you can ask for reusable cutlery sometimes, or pass on plastic straws, and if you do take one, perhaps you can use it a couple times instead of just one time. Replacing single-use items with reusable items. That one's very simple, especially shopping bags. I think in the past 5 years, we've seen a huge shift from plastic bags into paper and cloth bags. And I would say at first, a lot of people were kind of like, what? We don't have to use plastic? And I think there was a little bit of a transition time, but now you see so many people with reusable bags entering the store. So it just takes a very small shift in habit. We can also give up non-recyclable plastic or disposable items. We can opt for items that contain recycled plastic or non-plastic alternatives, perhaps bioplastics. Number 6, you can get involved and pick up plastic debris that you see. Whether you go for a walk with your family and pick up a couple of items from the park or from the ocean when you walk along the shoreline, every little thing helps. There's lots of organized trash cleanups which people can even get involved in. We can do better to sort and recycle our plastic waste. It's very simple to set up a 3 or 4 bin system in a house where you can sort your plastics, papers, aluminums, organics, all at the household level, which helps for sorting. We can apply the 5 R's: refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot. And rot is just their way of making compost start with an R. We can aspire to do zero waste lifestyles. There's been a huge push for it of people now looking to reduce all the waste that they can, and some people who have even lived a whole year and can put all of their plastic waste in a single mason jar. Maybe this can be supported through buying bulk and other lifestyle changes, going with bars of shampoo instead of shampoo bottles. And 10, the last thing we can do is support political actions and bans on single-use plastics and support policy changes which make it harder for companies to hand out single-use plastics. So for a deeper discussion, I know that one of the key tips from the David Suzuki Foundation was to ask for non-plastic alternatives. However, the whole point of this podcast is to get people thinking critically. Bioplastics and biodegradable plastics may offer a partial solution to the plastic problem we are currently facing. These types of plastics are not completely petroleum-based like their predecessors. However, they may contain only a percentage of renewable materials in order to be labeled as a bioplastic. Although this has some advantages, such as reducing the carbon footprint and emissions associated with extracting and manufacturing plastic products, we must still understand that bioplastics and biodegradable plastics are not a perfect solution yet. Many bioplastics are durable and resist decomposition in many environments. These products require optimal conditions found within industrial composting facilities. This means that a biodegradable plastic straw, which is ditched in a local park in a temperate region such as Canada or Whistler, even Northern Europe or Russia, may not degrade as easily as thought. A lot of these plastics require warm temperatures and direct sunlight, which we know doesn't always happen.